Tenyi has been one of the best decks in the game for a long time, and there have been a lot of adaptations to the deck since our last video on the deck, so let's revamp our knowledge and become better Tenyi players together. The Tenyi Advanced Guide on the channel by Weatherman is actually the most viewed video on our channel, so it's definitely weird to be talking about it again. If you haven't watched that video, then go ahead and do that. It will give you a solid foundation for the way that the deck operates, but the deck has more options these days. First things first though, let's talk about what the deck does differently. When Tenyi originally came out, the format was a lot less capable of dealing with it. So going into Guts turn 1 with Monk on the field and a Shathana in grave was a great starting play, and you'd always end up with an Ashuna in your hand to secure a follow-up play. This is still a board that you need to know that you can do. So if you haven't already watched the Tenyi Advanced Guide, go do that. It is going to be really important to have that existing Tenyi knowledge for the rest of this video. The deck has adapted as the formats have progressed, technically speaking. We are actually late to talk about the changes on the channel, but it's important to know these things, so that's why I'm making this video. The adaptations that this deck made are more often ending on the Link 3 Berserker of the Tenyi, playing all 3 of the level 4 Tenyis for a variety of protection, and also playing the field spell for really solid protection and grind game. Draco Berserker of the Tenyi is a really good interruption, don't get me wrong. However, Tenyi players have come to prefer protection over interruption in this deck to secure that follow-up play will go through against an ever-increasing power level into the game. A quick reminder of the pieces in play here. Berserker of the Tenyi is simply a Link 3 monster with 3k attack and no effects. The 3 level 4s are Shathana, Mapura, and Nahada, and the field spell is Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi. If your non-effect monster is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can banish Shathana from hand or grave to not only revive that monster, but non-target destroy an opponent's monster. The opponent will have to think twice about destroying your Berserker, because not only will it come back, but it'll take a piece of their board away. This isn't just destruction protection, but board breaking, and the mind game this applies to the game state makes it the best one out of the 3. If the opponent would target your non-effect monster with a card effect, you can banish Mapura from hand or grave to negate that effect and destroy it. Shathana is fantastic when it comes to protection, however, not everything the opponent is going to throw your way is going to be destructive, so Mapura being able to negate those things is important. If your non-effect monster would be involved in battle, you can banish Nahada from your hand or grave to reduce the opponent's monster by 1500 attack for the turn. One of the big issues with Tenyi is that it can be difficult to deal with monsters with destructive protection, the kind of things that Shathana and Shaman don't work on, and target protection so that Vishuddha and Baxia don't work on it. So in cases like those, it's important to have a Nahada to at least shrink that monster enough so that it can be beat in battle. Having these 3 different forms of protection covers nearly all bases, so setting these up in your hand and grave while getting out the Link 3 Berserker is going to be a really solid turn 1. Ashuna can help set this up by summoning one of them from the deck. Heavenly Dragon Circle can help set it up by converting one of your worms on field into one of these from deck, and Vessel for the Dragon Cycle can set this up better than anything by sending one of them from deck to grave and adding another from deck to hand. Heavenly Dragon Cycle, however, could instead use its other effect if you didn't use its first to tribute a Tenyi to search a Tenyi. If you discard it by the effect of Shaman of the Tenyi to revive another of your worms, then you can use the Heavenly Dragon Cycle to search either for one of your level 4s that you specifically need, or for the field spell Flawless Protection of the Tenyi. Flawless Perfection makes all non-effect monsters on the field unaffected by monster effects. Just by having this on the field, it doesn't matter if the opponent tries to destroy you by card effect or target you with a card effect with monsters, because it will be unaffected by monsters anyway. So you can save your protective effects for battle and for back row. This field spell also lets you draw 2 cards once per turn if the opponent special summons an effect monster while you control a non-effect monster. Drawing 2 cards just because the opponent decided that they wanted to play the game today is pretty damn disrespectful. Punishing them for doing something that they need to do, it pretty much guarantees that we are going to have a follow-up play. Let's say the opponent has ways to deal with the Flawless Protection, or the Shathana, or the Mapura, or the Nahada. If they do that, then the rest of the forms of protection can back us up. We have layers here to give the opponent a headache unless they storm forth Erebus us.
Like that's ever gonna happen.
And tribute summon my Erebus, use its effect to send 2 to the grave, send a card from their hand into the deck. He's got nothing left. Having multiple forms of protection turns our Berserker into an absolute tank that sticks around and the opponent can't seem to deal with a lot of the time. And if they can, you are likely still going to be alive, since you'll be able to gain a bunch of life points with a Legend of Heroes or 3 effects. This isn't necessarily a threatening board to end on in terms of interruption, as we will be letting the opponent play. It's more that we are unlikely to care that they are able to play the game, because there's a low chance that they'll be able to hurt us in any meaningful way, or at least in a way that we can't recover from. The easiest way to get our Link 3 onto the board is, of course, first of all to summon any Tenyi from hand, link it off into Monk of the Tenyi, summon any other Tenyi from hand, then link him off into the Link 2 Shaman of the Tenyi, discard a card to revive a Tenyi, and use that monster in the Link 2 to go onto our Link 3. This is fairly self-explanatory, but there are many points about this play that you need to know more about. Probably the biggest weakness of this play is Shaman of the Tenyi. It's the only effect during this whole play that activates on the field, meaning that it is vulnerable to negation like Effect Veiler. You can tell that your opponent might have an Effect Veiler if you feel a delay the first time you summon an effect monster. If you only start to feel delays when a card hits your grave, then it's more likely a DD Crow in the opponent's hand. Shaman is also weak to DD Crow, because after you target a monster on your grave to revive, then they can use DD Crow to banish that monster. It might be easier just to try for the Guts and Monk play, since it's easier to pull off while playing through interruptions. However, you don't necessarily have to give up on the Link 3 play if you have any other way of getting 3 monsters on the board. After you go into your Link 1 and summon another Tenyi from hand, you could normal summon one of your level 4 or lower Tenyis, or you could use Ashina's effect to summon another Tenyi from deck. This way, you have enough materials to go into the Link 3 without needing to rely on Shaman. If you don't feel any delays from the opponent's hand though, going into Shaman can be free real estate, converting cards in hand into bodies on board, and potentially even discarding the Heavenly Dragon Circle. If you think the opponent has Effect Veiler but not DD Crow, you might even choose to activate the Shaman regardless, just to discard the Heavenly Dragon Circle, knowing that the opponent will use Veiler on you, since there is no other time that the Veiler will help them during your plays, and you'll still be able to use that Heavenly Dragon Circle to get a search off. If you plan on doing this, make sure that you have another body on board before going into the Link 2, because searching a Tenyi won't let you special summon a Tenyi if you control the Shaman. You can always normal summon a Tenyi after going into Shaman though, so keep that in mind. When it comes to going second, the way you play the deck really should change up a bit, as you probably already know from Weatherman's Advanced Guide. The big play you should be focusing on most of the time is going into Baxia, as by going for this, you are either going to be getting rid of a sizable chunk of the opponent's board, or baiting out their best interruptions since they don't want to have to deal with Baxia. The biggest thing to keep in mind when going into Baxia is that you need to do it before activating Shaman. Shaman won't prevent you from summoning Baxia. However, Shaman will prevent the effects of any non-Tenyi monsters after she uses her effect, and Baxia isn't a Tenyi, so it needs to happen first. You'll need Adhara and either Ashuna on board or Vishuddha on board to accomplish a Baxia summon, and it will always target to spin 2 cards since Adhara isn't light like Ashuna or dark like Vishuddha. If Baxia gets negated, the Vishuddha is still going to be able to remove opponent's cards afterwards. Play is often going to look like summoning Ashuna and linking it off, summoning Adhara or Vishuddha from hand, and using Ashuna in grave to summon whatever is missing so you can go into Baxia. If you have the choice for which one is going to be summoned from hand and which one is going to be summoned from deck, special summon Vishuddha from hand. That way, if the opponent deals with it in a way you don't like, you can still normal summon Adhara and use Ashuna to special summon another Vishuddha from deck. But similarly, if they don't deal with it, but instead deal with the Adhara after you normal summon it, you can summon another Adhara from deck anyway. If you don't have Ashuna for this play, then Vessel for the Dragon Cycle can set that up for you just the same, while also giving you what you need in hand. You can link the Baxia off into Shaman if you need, and if you revive a level 7 but haven't normal summoned Adhara yet, you can do that. You'll also be able to go into Guts for its battle effect. If you feel that you can't safely get into a Baxia, it is still possible to set up the protective Berserker field when you're going second. Speaking of which, this deck has a lot of different lines for different situations, and you need to be able to keep them all in mind so you can decide which is best for that situation. There isn't a set turn 1 play, turn 2 play, follow-up play. This deck is one that needs to be able to make decisions on the fly. Different hands lead to the same outcomes, and if you're learning to play this deck from scratch, you really should be going to the Tenyi Advanced Guide before this. The main situations you can keep in mind are the Guts line that lets you end up with a Guts on board, the Berserker line that lets you end up with a Berserker on board, and the Baxia line which lets you use Baxia and then pivot into one of the other 2 lines, or simply OTK with whatever you think will work for that situation. A lot of the plays that you make in this deck are going to require you to think ahead. If I do this, then what will it prevent me from doing later? If I do this, then what will it allow me to do later? If you screw up your plays with this deck, you'll be able to look back and see where you went wrong and what you could do better next time. If you need help seeing where you might have gone wrong, join the 6K community Discord, read the rules to get access to the channels, and ask any Tenyi experts in the Tenyi channel, and they'll be able to help you see what you can do better next time. Earlier, I talked about the different forms of protection you can get for Berserker, and in this deck, it is possible to set up all 4 of them. Realistically though, some hands are going to force you into making a choice. If you're only able to get out one form of protection, then there are a couple things you need to consider. Which form of protection would be the most beneficial to me, and will it be beneficial enough to secure a follow-up play for me? Most of the time, the best forms of protection you can get are Flawless Perfection of the Tenyi to make the Berserker unaffected by monster effects and to let you draw 2 cards, potentially letting you draw into more forms of protection, or at least more follow-up play, or Shathana to let your Tenyi survive 1 destruction and break some of the opponent's board in the process. If you feel like this 1 protection will be enough, then that is okay. However, if you are only able to pick 1 form of protection, then it may be more beneficial to go for the Guts line. That way, you have the interruption of Guts as a way to protect yourself, as well as that other form of protection protecting your Monk instead of Berserker. If you can only pick 2 forms of protection out of the possible 4, then you should prioritize whichever 2 you feel are more beneficial for that situation. Sometimes you can tell what the situation is going to be by the field, sometimes you can tell by the opponent's character or their skill activating at the start of the duel, and sometimes you aren't going to know which situation it's going to be. In those cases, you should choose the field spell in Shathana, since that will cover the most bases. But if you can't get the field spell, then you can set up Shathana and Mapura, since that will cover the second most bases. If you can pick 3 forms of protection, then you aren't going to be in such a stressful situation that you need to struggle over which ones to pick. If you can only have 3, then you just decide which one is the least helpful. If you have access to all 4, that's fantastic, and it happens more often than you might think, since you may very well open some amount of the protective cards. Tenyi has a few hard counters, which realistically aren't even really hard counters because Tenyi can often play through certain things in creative ways. The main hard counters we're going to talk about are Abyss Dweller and Artifact Lancia. Abyss Dweller has the quick effect to detach material, so you can't activate cards in the graveyard that turn. You can play Forbidden Chalice to negate it when it activates, but if you don't open up with Chalice, then you aren't dead all of a sudden. You can still activate in hand to special summon your Tenyis, you can still link summon, and you can still activate your Tenyi effects in hand if you need them. Rather than using Ashuna from grave, you may want to use it from hand. Same thing with Vishuddha, and you may be able to set up a Baxia for an OTK, or Berserker with protection for next turn. You'll almost certainly be able to beat over the Abyss Dweller so that it doesn't prevent your protection on the next turn. Just special summon your extenders from hand, and if you need one of the grave effects, just use that effect from hand. It isn't pretty, but it's not like I'm telling you how to utterly crush Abyss Dweller. I'm just saying that Abyss Dweller isn't the end of the world. Artifact Lancia is a bit more rough. It says you can't banish cards for the turn, so you'll basically be in the same situation as Abyss Dweller, except that you can't even banish cards from your hand. You'll still be able to do all the special summoning you need though, so try to set up some protection, and you might even be able to go into Baxia to break their board and use Shaman to help you get enough damage on board. As you can see, you still got a game plan if you get Dweller, you still got a game plan if you get Lancia, but if they got both, or if they got too much else on top of these, then it's kind of a rep, but we just got to take those L's sometimes. This deck isn't perfect. In this meta, DD Crow is going to be helpful to keep Shiranui and Mayakashi at bay. You can banish the tuners to slow them down quite a lot. It's not very good against Tachyon, but as the format progresses, more decks might pop up that DD Crow might be helpful against anyway. You can play Gnomes against Tachyons, IDP against a bunch of decks, Chalice if you're afraid of Dweller, but this deck doesn't have a huge amount of room for tech slots, so you're probably better off with these options in the side deck, meaning whatever is most likely to work, or whatever is most versatile. Something that a lot of players forget about with Shaman of the Tenyi is her effect to target and destroy a card when a non-effect monster is involved in a battle. It might even be good to end your turn with her on field alongside Berserker, so that if they dare to attack the Berserker, the Shaman will retaliate by destroying one of their cards, potentially even the attacking card itself. It may also be good to keep her on the field when breaking a board or going in for game to make it easier, just another form of removal to clear the way for game. I just thought I'd bring this up again, even though it is talked about in the advanced guide, just because so many people forget about this. I think the real mark of a pro Tenyi player is the way that they utilize their Shaman, simply because its versatility is often overlooked. Originally, when we started making advanced guides, we were really trying to create guides that did more than just explain how a deck is played, but of course, we aren't able to see the future, so we can't go over absolutely everything as soon as it comes out. Hopefully these update videos can help to enlighten anybody that watches the guides, but sees things done differently afterwards. If you guys have any other questions about Tenyi, be sure to watch the advanced guide, watch this video again, but also check out Sean Matrai's combo video on the deck, as it visualizes all of the different combos you need to know for the deck. Like for real, I think that your Tenyi learning experience won't be complete until you watch that video. But anyway guys, let us know how you feel about this style of video, and if you like the video, then slap like now, subscribe if you haven't already, hit the bell to get notified every time we make a new video. Have yourselves a good one guys, and I've been Undead from Team 6K, signing out.
Hey, why they gotta hate on me? I done got me 250,000 views and they still saying they low key. They ain't wanna come work with the kid, but I'm flexing with Zay on beats. How they ask for a spot at the gym, but they leave all the weight on me. I don't ask them to wait on me. They would ask where they gon' be with a song if they wanted the weatherman. I ain't asking to pay no fees. She was homeless and needed a spot. I ain't ask her to pay no lease. I ain't ask her to say no please. I ain't ask her to make no cheese. Scream fake, but it ain't on me. Got clean so it ain't no streets. Why green if it ain't no keeps? Brought cream so it ain't no beef. My team say it ain't no chief. My demon they hang on me. They seemingly ain't no peace. I seen him, he ain't no beast.